kind of funny how the prominence of gap wedges has really grown the last couple of decades. Because like even an example is just I had a friend of mine who was asking me just for kind of some advice. What should I do next with my bag? Had a set of irons, but it was he went to pitching wedge and then sand wedge, lob wedge. 50, 56, 60 or whatever. So it's pitching wedge and then sand wedge, lob. I mean, he didn't have a gap wedge in his bag at all. And realistically, with a lot, depending on what the iron set is, you probably need 2 clubs actually between that pitching wedge and that sand wedge. Where you might have a 44-degree pitching wedge nowadays or 45, and then that sand wedge at 56, right? There are maybe 2 clubs that need to go in there. And so he's probably struggling mightily with a lot of those distances there. And today, now when it's sometimes unclear where, what a pitching, a lot of times from the naked eye, you can't look at a pitching wedge to see how much loft is on it, right? So, like you said, maybe it's a 48-degree gap wedge and a 52 that transitions to your 56 and 60 or whatever the case might be, but because those are the shots you want to make sure you hit close.
Absolutely,
is right in that range instead of trying to hit a what is it, a 3/4 pitching wedge and to totally feel it out from that distance. Having options there that you can trust and rely on and not have to think too much about can help you in a big way.
Yeah, and I mean that touched on a great point there as well. Where when I'm gapping someone's bag, I rarely want to take a wedge away to give them something in like the woods or hybrid section. You're going to have a lot less shots from 200 plus than you are from 100 yards and in. 100 yards and in is really where you kind of make or break a round. That's you hit a great drive, you got 110 in, put one close, tap in birdie. Whereas, I mean, how often are you hitting a 3-wood to 5 feet that you can then get, let's say, a tap in eagle? I mean, it's great in thought, but in practice, having more wedges and more control with your wedge game is really what's going to lead to better scores, especially when it comes to kind of scrambling. Let's say you, God forbid, cold top an iron, and now we have a 70-yard wedge shot. Making that up is going to be a lot more important than giving you another option from a 5-wood or a 3-wood.
Right. There are way more shots in a golf round hit from that 100 yards and in, call it, range, than, that specific distance from, say, your 3-wood to your hybrid, right,
Absolutely.
or in that range. So is there... on the wedge gapping piece, is there a amount of loft or degrees that you would like between each wedge, or is it, or do you try to base it more so on the actual like the yardages or the launch and height? I mean, how do you go throughout that in a fitting?
I would say there's kind of 2 ways I approach it. I do kind of do both ways there. If someone tells me like I need a wedge from this yardage, we're finding whatever loft gets you that yardage, and we'll kind of build off it from there. I mean, as weird as it sounds, I have sold like a 54 and a 56 degree to someone because they use their 56 out of the sand and they love it.
Yeah.
But they needed something that goes a little further than that from about 100 yards. That was a shot they really struggled with. So we did both, and then we didn't go with a 60 because they had used 60s in the past. They really just didn't like how much loft was on it. They felt they kind of scooped underneath it. So their 56 is basically their lob wedge, but it's primarily a sand club for them. And then the 50 and the 54 are more kind of out on the fairway or the rough, mid-range to full wedge shots.
Sure.
For most players, I'm usually looking for a 4 or 5 degree gap between all of their wedges. So let's say someone gets an iron set that's at 44 degrees aloft. We'd be looking at a 48 degree, a 52, and a 56.
Okay.
If we have the room for it, we'll absolutely throw in a 60. But I would say these days, lob wedges aren't as important for a lot of players. A lot of players don't feel comfortable opening that up and seeing that much loft on the club. Again, if it's between a 60 and another wood, I'm probably leaning towards that 60 because I want to give you versatility around the greens. But I'm seeing more and more players kind of drop that lob wedge out of their bag as they're just kind of feeling uncomfortable with it. I actually play kind of an unconventional wedge setup myself. I have a 5-degree gap between all of them. What I do is I have a 45-degree pitching wedge, a 50-degree gap wedge because that is my tried and true 120. Like I know exactly how far that's going, so I didn't want to change that. And then I actually switched into a 56 degree that I bent to 55 and then a 60. So I have an even 5-degree gap between all of my clubs there. In the past, I had used a 50, 54, 58, but I felt like the numbers kind of were clumping a little bit too close together. I wanted to make some more separation between that kind of sand wedge and that lob wedge from where my gap wedge was. And I've really liked that loft structure.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, even like that's something we can do at second swing too. If you feel like maybe this 5-degree separation is for you, we can obviously do that with a 54 and bend it back, or we can take the 56, bend to 55. But there are options that you have, and I think the most important thing, to your point, is just making sure it's consistent and or conducive to how you're going to use your wedges.
Absolutely.
Like the person you referenced that's going to use their 56 for basically anything around the green, including bunkers. So I wanted to touch on that because I think that's such a piece of the. There's, again, when it comes to, you have pitching wedges and you also have kind of gap wedges with the set sometimes. And a lot of people don't know what those even are for themselves, number one. So a lot of times there might be a gap wedge in the set that is, maybe it's 48 or maybe even stronger than that.
Yeah.
And then they think they can go straight to sandwich from there. And so making sure the lofts are at least consistent and or don't have such big gaps is going to be huge for your opportunities to score, because like we said, so many of these clubs are the ones that give you the birdie chances or make sure you're saving pars out there, keeping your round going. Like those are the clubs that are important.
And one thing before we move on from this topic that I get asked a lot, should I use a set gap wedge or should I use a traditional wedge? My answer typically is, how are you planning on using this? If it's going to be a full swing or partial swing club and you like your iron set, get the gap wedge. It's going to feel very similar. It's basically just a shorter distance pitching wedge. If you're going to use it around the greens, I'd probably go with the traditional wedge. You'll see a little bit more spin, more control. It's not as hot off the face. For example, like I love to use my 50 to hit kind of like low spinny chip shots. If I were to use a traditional gap wedge, it would just be a little jumpier than I want it to be. So It kind of depends on how you want to play that wedge.